well written, well acted, well carried out story. And it's very complex, but it's not confusing. At least I hope it didn't confuse anybody. There was one moment when he leaves the hospital and he's not in his bandages anymore, but I forgive them for that. So I see this movie as all about redemption. And it's not just redemption for yourself, it's redemption for other people who may have wronged you. It's about forgiveness. So it's sort of in keeping with the holidays. Had I realized that, I might have programmed it closer to the holidays, but that's okay. A film like this is welcome at any time because it brings us closer to our own decision-making and the fickleness and the stubbornness that we have of our own opinions and how they can change, and they change because of other people. So it's also very lyrical, and it's written by Martin McDonagh, who did In Bruges. Did anybody see In Bruges? It's about two hitmen that you sort of grow fond of. I just rewatched it, and oh my God, it's so personable, and you feel so much for the characters at the end. It's really a lovely film. It's a great mystery. And Ralph Fiennes, who plays the evil meanie, the ringleader, he's terrific as well. Not quite as well developed as the others. I'm sorry, Fern, you have a friend next to you. I don't know her name. Hi, you've been with us before, but I don't remember.
No, Linda, this is my friend Linda. She's here visiting.
Oh, well, welcome, Linda.
She used to live with me, and now she's visiting me.
Okay. This is how Fern spends maybe 2 Thursdays a month night.
It's true.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's so much in this film, and yet it's not that heavy-handed. And it's a lesson in filmmaking, and it's a lesson in storytelling, and mostly it's about a lesson in our empathy for characters, because we're manipulated all over the place. I mean, you like Dixon, the deputy, not at all in the beginning. He's a bigot and a racist and a meanie, and he's stupid. I don't feel that way about him at the end, you know. And Frances McDormand is pretty much the same stone-faced, bitter, angry woman all the way through, but you feel her feel things. It's not like she's numb. I loved her performance because I thought she was biting her tongue constantly and holding it in. Yeah, Fern.
I felt like it was a lesson in female power. I was stunned by her willingness to confront whenever she didn't agree, whenever she didn't like something, to just smack in the face, say, I don't like it. As you know, as a female who operates often in a male world, I don't find it that easy to do. It's an effort. You know, women tend to use qualifiers and to say, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry, but, or I believe. And she didn't do any of that.
No apologies, no.
If she didn't like something, she just smacked right in the face, or she socked him in the face, or whatever she did. I thought she was magnificent.
Yes,
She was. And, you know, I would say, you'd say power because she stood up to men. I say strength because she had the courage to stand up to men and stand her ground. So yes, it's a different kind of power.
They're different things.
They are. But this woman was tough through and through. And she was probably tough, I don't want to say all the time before her daughter died, because her husband beat her and she finally had enough and threw him out. So she reached a point where she realized she had to be self-defensive. And I don't want to say defensive. I'm saying she had to protect herself in her own interest, because her husband certainly wasn't.
She's also offensive. She was capable of violence.
Oh, yeah. She had a tongue, right? And
not just a tongue, action.
Acid.
That's the dentist.
No, this woman was pissed off. There's no question about it. And in a way, we relish that because she gets to act out her need for vengeance, her anger, for the first 45 minutes, hour of the movie, more than an hour of the movie. Roz, did you have something to say?
Yes, I agree with everything you're saying, except the relationship she had with her daughter and her toughness with the daughter.
Yes.
That really bothered me, because I thought you know, what happened to the daughter might have been prevented if they hadn't had that disgusting argument. And I think that she treated the daughter and the son in less than, you know, motherly way.
Yeah, she
The
was
anger
tough with
came
that.
out.
I want to come back to that, Roz, because her guilt about her daughter is a big part of it.
Yeah.
And we only learned of that in the one flashback, you know, which was restraint on the filmmaker's part. What happened that night when she got raped and murdered? And we learned quite early. I didn't write down the time when that happened, but maybe I could find it. It's fairly deep in the movie.
Her daughter expresses.
What?
When the daughter
Anybody
expresses.
remember when that occurred? The flashback?
Roughly halfway through, I think, Jim.
Yeah, it's I made a note. I wrote flashback. I can't read my writing. Oh, there it is. It's yeah, about 35, 40 minutes in. So we're kept in that kind of suspense. It's like it's horrible enough. We may have seen some of the police photos before that. I think we do. Rockwell gets sick when Woody Harrelson is looking at the photos in front of the billboards. Let's start at the beginning, though, and take this film apart because it's just so well put together. I think you can quickly savor how well put together it is. And part of it is character development. You know, it opens with her driving along and seeing the blank billboards and pausing and stopping. And most people, most directors or writers would say, oh, I got an idea what to do here, and she'd move on. No, he really worked on her train of thought, which was unspoken. And we didn't know what it was about yet, but we knew something important was happening. And she does so much with her face and her interior motivations. She's always a wonderful actor. And this is all within the first 6 minutes. And she goes straight to the advertising office and has that hilarious scene with Red, right? Red Welby, who's like kind of a screw up himself. But it's hilarious. She's way ahead of him. She tells him all about it. You know, she says, fine, here's what I want you to write. Here's the money. And as long as I don't say these words, I know I'm okay. And he leaves her kind of astonished. I think the lovely button on the scene is, she says, when can you have the billboards up? And he says, Easter. And she says, good, that's fitting. In other words, it's about let the truth rise up from the ashes. You know, it's like that'll get them when they're sensitive and sentimental and feeling righteous on that holiday. So that's the first 6 minutes of the film. I think it's a wonderful portrait of her and of Red. Red becomes very important later on in the movie, and we'll talk about that. Then we introduce Sam, Jason Dixon. He's a foul-mouthed racist cop who's dumb as a thumbtack, you know, and could be just as damaging. And his introductory scene is only 2.5 minutes long. So you think, oh, he's just, you know, he's going to be the villain, maybe. And then he sees the billboards and he calls the chief at dinner. And William Willoughby, it's Woody Harrelson, and he's got his charming wife and 2 daughters. And he's got a mouth on him. He's blunt as can be, just like she is, like Mildred is. And well, these characters have a lot in common, you know, and we'll cover that. And you see that he's a loving dad. And the next morning he goes to see her because he's seen the billboards. And it's a direct affront to him and his standing in the town. He's much beloved. And although we don't see a lot of evidence of that, but we're willing to buy it because he's the sheriff in the white shirt, even if his hat is black. And, you know, he says to her, oh, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. We meet Desiree, the black shop assistant, and then we go to Jason, his mother. His mother's a hoot, isn't she? This crusty old
Oh, God.
hillbilly woman. I mean, these people are all in a way stereotypes, but there's so much of who they are. They break the stereotype, or they make it real. You know, you feel like you really get her. I'm sure she chewed tobacco when she was a kid, you know, and dressed heavily. She's always shown with a beer in her hand too. And very funny. And they're watching the news report on TV. And then we see Willoughby after he sees the news report and goes to feed his horses. And the next morning, Willoughby goes to Mildred's house and he wants to talk to her.
Mm.
So that's a testament to his courage and his character. And we think he's going to chew her out. And really, well, you tell me what you thought of the scene. What did you think he was going to do at the beginning of the scene? Anybody? Hello, Lynn Machikow and Steve Greenberg. It's a little late. I'm sorry. And Sally Hecht, welcome. The two of you are first timers. He says, you know, I really wanted to solve this, but I couldn't. And none of the DNA in the world would point to any truth. And then the capper of the scene, you know, I have cancer. And she looks at him. Again, this is tough Mildred, right? Everybody in town knows that. This is not news. You know, it's not like I'm sorry to hear that. Some of you may have felt. But, you know, it's like somebody says at 16 minutes in, the billboards won't be as effective after you die. So I'm putting them up now. That's Mildred. You know, it's like the whole point is to stir the pot. That's who she is. And if it happens to be with her daughter or her son, she's going to do it. She is a tough cookie and she's not soft. You know, you're all right to say we have evidence that she was not lovable. I don't know if it was worthy of a beating from her husband, but she had 2 kids with him. And clearly this is what happens. Well, I don't want to be regionally ethnic about it, but it's a country relationship. You know, she went along with it. She had 2 kids. He got to be abusive. He was a cop, you know, before he left the force.
Jim,
And, yeah.
Women like that are all over the country.
Yes.
You know, it's not a country thing. Women are supposed to be likable, and she wasn't. And that is it's a capital offense in this country. You know, it lost Hillary the election potentially.
Yes, it did.
And it's,
Well,
as I said in the beginning, we're talking about a woman who's not typical for how we're raised to be.
Right. Well, not every woman
I
loses a
think there
daughter.
is a distinction. You know, you equated courage and power. And I think there are a lot of women who are courageous, but not powerful.
Yes, you're right.
And she was powerful. And she didn't care if you liked her or you didn't. She stood up for what she wanted.
Right, exactly.
Oh, okay, but I don't think she did that in her marriage at first. She
Oh.
left an abusive husband.
Linda would like to say something.
Okay, Linda.
I have a comment about that, and I think that with the opportunities for women in marriage relationships in general, you get to a point of accepting the loss and the diminishment of who you are to
Yes.
survive. And she just hit the wall, and that was enough. And
So
that may have emboldened her all the way across the board.
that was the abuse of power that pushed her over the line. You know, it is Me Too all over again. It's, you know, as a man, I'm ashamed and totally not necessary. So believe me, I'm extremely sympathetic, but I'm glad you pointed that out. Abused women are not to be blamed for being abused or for staying in the relationship. And that's documented. It's just, you know, they have to rise, and she pulled herself up by her bootstraps, as far as we can tell,
Yeah.
and made the decision to toss him out and divorce him. And given the attitudes at the police station in Ebbing, downtown, it's surprising that her husband was a lot like those guys. Maybe not like Woody Harrelson, but certainly like Dixon and Cedric, the sergeant. So there's an interesting confrontation between, and this is important because it's between Dixon and Mildred at the bar at the pool table. We don't know what's going to happen to the two of them in their relationship later on, but it is nasty and bitter as hell. And she's used to this kind of behavior from the town, and she's angry at the town as well, because nobody else is angry almost a year later that it hasn't been solved. Of course, she's the only mother. At the same time, it's like this is the small town not pulling together. At some point it fell off their radar, but not hers. And Richard Dinklage comes in, the small person named James, and Red comes in, and they all have like words with Dixon, because his hair is red. Dixon accuses him of being a communist, which sort of dates him in history, with that kind of prejudice. And he gives Red a tough time, as well as Dinklage, James. And then she goes home from the bar after, telling Dixon to get lost. Who's waiting at home with her, for her, besides her son? Anybody remember? The priest?
Yep.
Oh, right.
And how would you describe what Eric, how would you describe what the priest is telling her, what his mission is with her?
Well, his mission is to calm her down or quiet her down. And his collar did nothing to prevent her from carrying on with her basic personality. And she told him where to go.
Yeah. Let me extrapolate from that. He says, we're all here to help you. The whole congregation, the clergy is here for you, whatever you need. But these billboards, we don't agree with you on. And then this is like one of her great speeches. She compares the situation to the Crips and the Bloods in Los Angeles.
Right.
And the law that was bad. I mean, how this woman knows about that, I don't know.
That's what I was wondering. How did she know about that?
Well, there was an
Picked up
internet.
a newspaper, did she? She may never, maybe she
Well,
never read the newspaper.
You don't know. No, you have to give her the credit that she went online. There was email.
Smart lady.
Whenever that was. And she said, the church is like a gang. You joined it. And then she accuses him, the church of sexual abuse, of boys in the basement. And as far as I'm concerned, you're all members of a gang. You're all guilty. And this made me think of the high holidays, or holy days, as other people say, because it's like part of Yom Kippur is saying, Yom Kippur starts out with, forgive me because I'm going to break all my promises of the last year. I'm flawed. And it repeats it and repeats it. And said, all those promises I made, I'm going to break them. And I'm going to commit new offenses that I didn't promise I wouldn't do. But forgive me because now is a new year and I want to be inscribed in the book of life. Well, I don't go that far with it. But clearly it's important to be aware of your offenses. And she's not aware of all of her offenses. She knows she's angry. She knows she's cold and she's tough. But that doesn't get in the way of her primary concern, which is finding out who killed her daughter and vengeance. But she lets the priest have it. Really, he's speechless. And I'll come to the end of that scene in a moment, but it's like, it's such a perfect retort. How dare you say I should stop this when you have bailed from the fight for justice? And she leaves the room. She says, so finish your tea and leave the house, my house. And there's this dead silence between the son and the priest. And the son says something inane like, well, thank you for coming over. And it's funny. I mean, did anybody laugh at that? At the awkwardness of that? You see? And this is something that Martin McDonagh, the director who also wrote the script, wrote into the script. There's a little bit of humor that's really personality-based or situation-based in so many of these scenes. Whether somebody's funny because they don't know something or they have a new take on something that's just happened. So I'll try and call them out. But this really added up to my appreciation for the movie, because apart from feeling how desperate she was and how hurt and damaged she was, and then slowly learning how damaged everybody else was, including Woody Harrelson Willoughby, who has pancreatic cancer and is terminal. And we learned late in the movie that Dixon, his father abused him and left him, you know, and I suppose there are other stories, you know. So she's fighting back because she says, how dare you not acknowledge somebody else's pain, even though the priest is trying to acknowledge the pain, but they have forgotten about it. Now it's about the billboards and keeping that small town spirit alive, and the dying sheriff, whom we know is dying from
Pancreatic cancer.
yeah, but as protecting him from more sorrow in his last days. Can't you pity the man? And she says, well, can't you pity me now? And it's a feeble response. You know, people want to forget about that horror because it didn't happen to them. She can't, right? So she goes to the dentist. And that's
Oh, God.
very funny scene.
Oh.
Very funny scene. And what does the dentist do that pisses her off so much? Anybody? He
We
brings
want to
up
talk
the
about
stuff.
the billboards.
Yeah, but he's saying, you know, we love you, but please back off. And she's sick of hearing it. So she drills the dental drill in her
Right in his nail.
thumbnail. Yeah. And he lodges a complaint, we find out later. And then Woody Harrelson, this is this is part of the ongoing humor of the movie. That's funny. And then Woody Harrelson visits her and he says, did you visit the dentist today? And she said, no. Well, did you drill a hole in his fingernail? No, I don't know what you're talking about. It's hilarious the way she's denying it. And he knows she's denying it. You know, it's sort of a formality. He has to confront her because that's what the sheriff would do in that town.
I have a comment to make.
Yeah.
Not only did she deny it, but her lips were numb from the Novocaine.
Exactly right. I love that detail too. Thank you. You know, it's like, so literally she's lying through her teeth.
Right.
But isn't that what men do when confronted with the stuff that they've done? They say, did you do that? No, it never happened.
No, only Southern men from Missouri.
Yeah. I
Oh,
think
really?
so.
Men all over the world do that. I mean, how else could we have
Didn't
gotten to this
happen. You
point?
got a witness? Didn't happen.
Right. He said, she said, right? Tough. I got away with it, you know?
Wasn't that the scene where the little person began to show affection towards her and supported her in her lie?
I don't
No,
know
that
if
was
it came
later.
up, but he does. You see the slight turn, only you don't expect him to ask her out on a date because he has no grounds to do so. But he's, you know, that starts in the pool room, I think. Well, Mildred, it's just you and me.
Right.
And they let it hang there.
Jim, can
Yeah.
I ask a question of the group and you?
Yeah.
Is it going too far to think that there's 3 billboards? And that's significant when you think of Christ on the cross, and in a way, the chief is being crucified by her, when in reality, there was no evidence. As he explained to her, it wasn't that he had given up. There's a kind of innocence. And then you talk about the Easter scene, and then there is, of course, the kind of resurrection at the end of the film. Am I reading, is that wrong?
I think a little too much, but it's clear that he's the sacrifice. We'll come to that soon, but he's the sacrifice on which the whole film turns. One indication that he is that it happens before the halfway point in the movie. It happens at 50 minutes, and the movie is almost 57 minutes long or something. So that means there's a lot to follow, a lot to come after that. And it causes a change of heart between Dixon. It's that's the suicide comes halfway, but when she starts her campaign against Dixon, against Willoughby, it brings out Dixon's protectiveness of the father figure that he didn't have. You know, the straight shooting, sober guy who knows he has a good heart, but is a stupid, dumb cop who just wants to be a good cop. Another incident of, let me make sure we covered that. Oh, so the son at the breakfast table, you know, chews her out. He says, thanks for making me remember all this. And she checks out her daughter's room, and then we have the flashback. Mitch?
Now, is that where she flips the Rice Krispies?
Yeah, yeah. And that's kind of funny. I mean, this woman's tough. She pushes the envelope in relationships, you know, and the kids are used to it, except the daughter had enough. And that's why the flashback comes in. It's a fight. It's a bad fight. First, it starts about the car. How many people have arguments like that with their children? Maybe it's not about a car, but it's something else. And you try and make up. You say, well, I'll give you money for a taxi, but you can't have the car. And then it escalates from there. And then she says, well, I'll just walk. I may even get raped on it as I go. And then this is astonishing. The mother says, I hope you do get raped.
I hope so, yeah.
Hope you do.
Yeah, and it's like, oh my God, who would have put words like that in a mother's mouth? And of course, this is a unique character. And by this point, we really have a sense of her determination, her strength, her power. And she's not going to be held down because she's been damaged the way, fortunately, very few of us have been. You know, the loss of a child before yourself is just, it's one of life's greatest tragedies. I hear from the psychologists and doctors. And in a way, it's given her pause to rethink her life, but she sends herself on a mission to find out who did it and get revenge, largely because nobody's been doing it. But you know, she has to learn to forgive the townspeople for losing interest. She can't forgive Harrelson because that's his job. But that's why she can't stand it when the townspeople, you know, come and pity her, but say, please take the billboards down. Because that means people don't really understand where she is. In a way, it's a denial of her pain. Yeah. You know, the billboards give an expression to her pain and empowers her to go further with them, you know. And yeah, you know, she doesn't care about the sheriff because she feels the sheriff isn't doing enough. And that's why that scene where he comes to talk to her is so important. And she says, what you should have done. He said, well, we have civil rights laws. You know, It ultimately says, I can't do that to people we have no right to, no suspicion of. And then he says he's dying. She says, everybody knows that, you know. And the billboards are there because they're more effective now than they will be after you're gone. So that's another example of the humor, the irony, the cleverness of this woman. It keeps this film light on its feet. I mean, if you tried to tell this as a straight drama, it would be, I don't know, it would take a lot less time, but it would just be filled with venom and hatred.
Oh, the scene, Jim, when he takes the girls to the lake and he threatens them that they can't move. And then he grabs a bottle of wine and he goes off in the bushes with her, was so outrageous and so funny.
It is funny, but it's sweet because he is obvious. He takes the blanket, he takes his wife, he takes the wine. It's like we adults know what's going to happen and, you know, under cover of bushes somewhere. And it's a darling scene, and it's sort of, it shows him as a father in the best way, but he's talking to them like his patrol sergeants, isn't he? You know, the mission is this, and you will not do this. This is, or else you will jeopardize the operation. You know, it's funny.
Was funny.
It humanizes him. You know, so when he goes, you feel that much worse, and that sets up his last night. That happens the day of. So, I mean, this film is remarkable in that it can go so deep and be so light on its feet at the same time. And then she starts setting up flowers in front of the billboards. and the deer approaches. What did you think of that scene?
It's interesting.
Yeah, why? What did she say to the deer? Anybody? Oh, come on, you were all moved by it. It's one of the sweetest scenes in the movie. Is this?
Reincarnation.
Yeah, it's okay. Here we go. You and Jeffrey can go along. She's talking to the deer as though the deer is her daughter.
Right.
And it's just so lovely. And she knows it's a fiction, you know, she smiles at herself. She's very self-aware. And that's the beauty of Frances McDormand's performance, is that she's showing you all her different facets while she shows you only the tough side. You get it. You know, she observes her own vulnerability. She's just can't resist pursuing it. But this brings out the reason for her pursuit. You know, and she says to the deer, you know, aren't we afraid that the world is all empty, that there is no God? You know, and that means there is no justice for her daughter, and there's no balm for her anger and her pain.
And
And
she can be strong and powerful and also vulnerable and profound and obscene. She's all of those things. She's so multidimensional that it isn't simply a powerful woman who's in your face. It's a full person.
Right. After that line about the world being empty, she cries to herself. Great performance, just great. And she's earned it, you know. She's earned our believing the real tears.
Yeah.
Because of what she said, but what the fawn is represented and what the whole vengeance agenda she has represents. And we'll come back to that. Is the whole world empty? And then there's a hilarious line.
Hold on before you shift. I think
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought that part with the deer also had a lot to do with her grief and speaking to the deer in the place of her daughter. So grief is really that love with no place to go.
Yeah.
And just experiencing that profound grief at that tender moment and placing that love with the deer and the understanding, I thought was a very powerful moment.
This is a very powerful exercise that psychologists often play in group therapy, where they have you talk to the deceased relative and say what you've always meant to say. It's a way of processing and getting beyond where you're stuck in the relationship with that woman, or excuse me, with that person, whoever it may be. So yes, Linda, thank you. It is absolutely serves that purpose in the film. So the filmmakers know this. I don't know, I've never met the man. I just feel like he's so smart and so insightful. And he finds really novel ways of bringing character and the eloquence of the character out to the audience, instead of saying a bunch of trivial, ham-fisted things that tell us. Even though she's very verbal and the words are important, I wouldn't say it's a verbal film, although it's very much a part of it.
The deer, Jim, does also symbolize beauty and grace.
Yes.
And hope, actually, that there's still some beauty in the world and something incredibly delicate.
Right.
In an incredibly ugly and violent context, right?
And innocent. Like her daughter may have been angry and kind of punky, but her daughter was worthy of love, and she did love her daughter.
Of course.
So the world, Fern, you're right. The world is complicated. We are all complicated, and this filmmaker acknowledges that. Okay, that brings us up to the evening of the lake scene. Oh, this is very funny. She goes to the lawyer. I'm sorry. It's an issue of trust. And she says, oh my God, you can't trust a lawyer or an ad man. What has the world come to? You lawyers will get a hoot out of it. And those who've been in advertising will laugh at those who remained in advertising. And it's a great line that, you don't have to talk about moral corruption for gain, other than go beyond that line. It doesn't have to be ham-fisted. It takes a swipe, at conventional bias. And I don't know if the assistant comes in with the extra payment in that scene or not. Yes, remember the assistant whom Red is probably playing around with says, Red is saying, that was just a deposit. You're a month behind already. And the assistant comes in with an envelope filled with $5,000 in cash. Who'd it come from? I don't know. Some Mexican guy. I mean, this is the zeitgeist of a small town, Missouri, right? Or some adorable little Mexican boy. Somebody else says that. And she says, "Did I do good?" I opened it and I read the letter. And the letter is hilarious. And it's another example of Woody Harrelson's magnanimity, that he really was sincere when he said, "I would have done anything I could have to find out who killed your daughter." Now, she doesn't know he's going to kill himself at that point, because there's a letter to follow later. But it says he's thinking ahead. He is trying to get the most out of his passing that he can. And it's all unsaid. You have to understand the gesture. So this is what I mean when I say the writer did not tell, he showed. And it wasn't veiled. We, ultimately knew who the money came from, so it wasn't a mystery.
But it's a double entendre too, Jim. The money, the gift of money, he says in his letter after he's dead, he says, now you're going to have another month of this billboard.
Yeah. Right.
People are going to think, how brutal you are in the face of my death. I mean, it's, you can view it as dry humor.
It is. No, it's
something else, I guess.
And the character of Woody Harrelson knew it was funny. That the gesture was kind of revenge on his own town. I support you. We should have found out, but we couldn't. It's such a sweet part of the movie. And
just wanted to comment on it. We couldn't. I think that people feel when something terrible happens, there needs to be someone to blame. And in general, our culture believes that. But if you read Job and you believe it, and if you live long enough, you have to believe that sometimes just shit happens.
That was exactly what was on my mind. Thank you for saying it. I mean, this is what she meant. The world is empty. There is no God. Stuff just happens. And we mortals have to live with it. Now, the suicide is very touching because he's clearly doing it with premeditation. He writes we found out in a flashback, I think we see the letter. He puts the letter down on the table so she'll see it. He knows when his wife hears the shot, she'll come running. And, this wasn't quite clear in the storytelling. She's probably read the letter in the house when she looks so startled. And then she goes out to the barn and finds him.
There's a line in there, Jim, where the wife said before he went out there, "I'd like you to kill those horses."
Oh, right. Yeah, I'll do it for it. Yeah.
And
yes,
it's
foreshadowing. Right. So news spreads. I mean, the suicide is probably one of the most sweetly told, if I can use that description of it. You're totally with him. The man's dying, and we see evidence of him taking care of everybody else who will survive. And this is one of Woody Harrelson's best performances, because he doesn't play the dumb stoner or the stupid cop or the stupid person, or he's in the Hunger Games and he plays the dresser, or not the dresser, but I forget his role, but he helps the lead actress get through it. But this is a very different role than he's played. It's so warm-hearted. There's so much to him as a person and a character. I'm sorry he goes halfway through it. But the next morning, there's this ironic scene where we see Dixon boogieing to some cornball music, and you see through the window out of focus the other deputies and Cedric milling about on the street and embracing each other. And then they come in, nothing is said, and then somebody throws a chair and he sort of hears that and he takes out his earbuds. What's going on? And he gets the news, and the next scene is he's weeping in the bathroom with Cedric. And we later find out that that Dixon fainted when he heard the news. And it's, you know, it means he's now the new sheriff. And I've noticed throughout there's songs, the lyrics of these songs creep in between the moments of the scenes, and the lyrics are always very pointed. And they're usually about loss and loss of love. And one of them is about going to war. I just couldn't write down the lyric fast enough to catch it. But that's that character's turning point. You know, what does he do when he recovers? You know, go out and be a good cop, and then he takes his nightstick, walks across the street, smashes the glass door to Red's office, goes upstairs, punches him in the face with his pistol, breaks another window, and throws him out on the skirt roof so that he doesn't die. He rolls down the skirt roof and falls 9 feet maybe and survives. So that's his turning point. He finally takes his own rage at his own father, at missing his father who beat him, and he beats up somebody else. You know, it's sometimes said, and maybe Fern and Linda can comment on this, that the people who are abusers were abused themselves as children. That's a common dynamic. I don't know in what percentage that has been found, but I've heard that. That's kind of profound. This is how he takes it out on, he needs to seek blame too. This is Dixon's lame form of vengeance. You put up those billboards, and the billboards killed him. They made him so depressed he killed himself. You know, and that's not how Woody Harrelson sees it. Granted, sure, it was part of his life in his last days, but he began to see that, as he says in his letter to his wife, I didn't want you to see me falling apart. I didn't want to see you falling apart because you were losing me. I didn't want to see the effect of my death on the girls. It's better this way for all of us. So again, this is a man whose own life was in service of others. Even his death, he tried to make in service of other people.
I will say another religious element, which is that he leaves letters behind, which are like the epistles of Paul, and I'll stop there.
Okay. Well, maybe McDonough is a devout Catholic, you know, with an MC before his name. C stands for Catholic, you know. That's a joke. Forgive me if I offended anyone. But no, this resonates, you know, this, there's just so much to this that is religious, but it comes down to, as Yom Kippur does, how do we treat other people? How do we treat our own treatment of other people? You know, how do we look at ourselves knowing that we have sinned against other people? You know, there's a very funny joke I love to tell. Two men are sitting in a synagogue, and one leans over to his neighbor in the next seat, and he says, "You see that guy over there? He's an atheist." And the other guy says, "Well, that's between him and God. All I care about is if he paid for the roofing fund." You know, it's like,
Paid for the roofing fund.
yeah, it makes his contribution to the roofing fund. So low bar there for some people and high bar for others. But it's very much religious in that way. It's about conscience. It's about blame. It's about talking to yourself, looking at yourself. These are the best aspects of religion. Forget about the dogma or the rituals or the crusades that went on. It's like what's really inherent in the writing. You know, rather than the received word of God, how about the thousands of people who argued over it and rewrote it, you know, in the first 1,000 years AD, for us to interpret today. I mean, this is the wisdom. I think that might be, where's that coming from? Mitchell, could you mute yourself, Mitch? Okay. This is the point. It's not about the letter of the law or the letter of scripture. It's about the meaning, the values that are behind it. So of course, the framers of the Constitution wanted every man to have a musket in his cabin, but they weren't thinking about AR-15s. So how can we expect, the rabbinic scholars, of the 10th century to foreshadow what our needs are today, what our moral challenges are with each other? And this film really wrestles with all of that on an interpersonal level and on a community level. So enough of my rant, but that's why I don't like the originalists for you lawyers. Then there's the scene at school where she drives her son to school and a boy throws a drink on her windshield. And sure enough, Mildred's tough. She kicks him in the nuts and she kicks a girl in the crotch, but she forgives the guy who backs off from her. I mean, it's funny. This stuff is funny, and you have to laugh at it because it's not meant to show. It shows her passion just as well as it not being funny. It carries the male and more. And that's what this writer director had the skill and the awareness to bring out. He kept the tone light enough to be watchable and serious enough to be compelling. Okay, that's a tagline for an ad for it, but it's 3 or 4 years old.
Isn't that life in general?
Absolutely.
And I just read the quote and I can't remember from whom, but basically, saying that life is, funny moments within a tragedy. And that's what this movie did.
Yep. Well, and then you wonder, people like Francis or people like, excuse me for getting into the culture wars, 65-year-old white men who lost a job after working 20 years in a factory in the Midwest, and then blame the elites on the coast for the layoff and their lack of education and ability to get another job. Of course, we also didn't provide training for them, but it's like wounds that happen early go deep, and sometimes people don't recover from them, and they carry those wounds forward. And like Dixon carries his father's abusiveness, and she is carrying her guilt because she said, I hope you get raped to her daughter. And she did, and on and on. So then there's this guy in the shop. Well, the kids at school. And then the inspector from out of town comes, who's going to take over for Willoughby. And he fires Dixon, who can't find his badge. I mean, again, this is a serious dramatic development because it drives Dixon to the fringes of the murder and of the relationship he had with Willoughby, and his engagement with Mildred, makes him hate her all the more. And so that's an important scene, but there's levity in it. They treat this black guy coming in off the street whom they haven't seen before as, pretty darn close to an other being, and they ask to see his credentials, and he proves himself with tough talk, and he fires Dixon, he says, am I fired or just suspended? And Dixon, and Cedric says, I think you're fired. It's like, how clueless can he be? And yet the scene stands intact. He's fired. It's kind of funny that he doesn't quite realize it, but that's who Dixon is. So it's okay to have a joke at his expense, because he's going to be whoever he is until the very end. And that's really what makes the movie for me. And then the guy comes into the gift shop, strange man, and challenges Mildred. And you think, oh my God, is he really the killer? Or is he Fred the Willoughby's or what? And she's tough. He throws that tchotchke at the wall and says, that's $7. And he says, no, thank you. And it's about to get really tough, and she won't cave in, and he talks about her, and then the wife comes in and gives Mildred the letter that William wrote to her. Now, who knew that the wife had an Australian accent before this scene? Did anybody? She didn't have a lot of lines, right? I didn't get it. My wife says, oh, I knew she was English or Australian. Well, in this scene, her last scene in the movie, she's clearly an Aussie, if you have an ear for that sort of thing. The letter, and such. That's as close as I can get. But that's a lovely scene for her. Really great scene. I don't know how to feel as the wife of a suicide. How does anybody know? My girls are in the car. I don't know what we're going to do today. And this is vivid stuff. This is not aphorisms. This is people saying, I'm lost. You made me get lost. You know, that's the wife's feeling towards Mildred, but she honors her husband's wishes by giving her the letter, which she hasn't opened. And I thought that was a very affecting scene, and the letter to her is very important. It's a letter of apology. It's a letter of release. He's saying his final words to her, you know, I'm sorry I couldn't solve it. I'd give anything to solve it. And it does get through to her. She reads it, you know. And his reading of the letter is great. The writing of the letter is terrific. And then we go to Dixon and his mother, and she laughs at him, right? She calls him, you know, well, you were in, you know, she says, don't they owe you severance pay? And he says, I don't know. Well, I mean, at least a couple of thousand. I mean, you were there for 2 years or 3 years, and then plus 5 years at the academy. Well, one was found suspension. You had to do over. You know, it's like another jibe, another laugh. Sure, he had to repeat police academy. But that's who that mother is. See, that mother in her own way is just as tough as Mildred is. And he has to come back, and he says, after that insult, he comes back, and if, you know, he says, I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to come back and shoot you, he says to his mother. And then he walks off and she grins. Fern is laughing. It's like, yes, it's funny. And you have to feel good about laughing with this movie. You're not laughing at it. You're laughing at people's expense sometimes, but it's all for a point, you know, and it just enriches everybody's humanity, your sense of who they are as real people. So then there's the fire at the billboards. And you all think, oh, Dixon went off and he set fire to the billboards as vengeance, because Mildred's billboards made Willoughby shoot himself. That's Dixon's mindset at that point. And again, you have to, you know, that's what when I saw the billboards burning, I said, oh, he did it, because he, you know, he leaves the scene. He's moving out of the scene. He's pissed off. He would do something like that. Who else would do that? And they put the fire out. She's just ruthless against the burning of the billboards. Her son says, no, stop. She takes it, you know, she goes up to the top of the billboard, very dangerous, and sprays one. And then when he comes back with the second fire extinguisher, she grabs it from him. He wants her to stop, and she goes after the third billboard. And then the next morning, she's there, sitting on the flower box, talking to her slippers. Or maybe that's at her home. That's the next morning. She's talking to her slippers like she was talking to the deer, processing, you know, sharing with us what's on her mind. She's laughing at herself. She's critical. She's resolving. She's saying goodbye to her daughter at the same time. Those were probably her daughter's slippers. Very touching scene. You know, sometimes, you know, I don't talk about this much, but I call it cinematic poetry. There's something so lyrical, like the deer or the slippers. It's so grossly symbolic at the same time. It's beautiful. They picked the right metaphor for the object or the feeling they were talking about. And it's just, people don't do that enough, because we
Jim,
don't. Yeah.
Do you think her son saves her life when he gets her down from the billboard, as if she's prepared to go ahead and just go up?
I didn't. No. Well, I think she went up there mindless of the danger, just determined.
Well, it was on fire. She was just not coming down.
Right. Well, she paid $5,000. This was her message. How dare you destroy, you know, my empowerment? This is the symbol of her being an active voice in the community. Don't take this away from me. People have been taking it away from me for 12 months.
It almost appeared that she was prepared to go up with it.
Well, he thought she was. He thought she'd die, you know, trying to extinguish.
So did I.
Yeah, but that's good, Steve. That the filmmaker wants you to think that she's that tormented and that out of her mind that she'd endanger herself. And he's still so much loving her, he wants to protect her from herself. So it worked on you. That's everything that scene is about. Well, not everything, but it's like that's the son's role in it. Then there's the letter to Dixon that Willoughby writes. And this, I bought into this. Basically, the most important part of that letter, she says, you know, the most important, I know you want to be a good detective, and I'm concerned about you, but to be a good detective, you have to know love. Oh my God, what a bombshell that is. It's almost too heavy-handed. But I guess what he's saying is you have to love the puzzle, the conundrum so much, and the people affected by it, that you want to solve it for them. I think that was his message. And he's so entranced while reading that letter, he uses his keys to get into the station. And fresh off the billboard fire, Mildred goes to the store across the street, it's probably the ad agency, and she starts throwing firebombs at the police station. Oh, by the way, she also calls the police station and there's no answer, because Dixon isn't going to answer the phone at night. So she thinks, oh, no one will get hurt. Right? We've seen this in other movies before, the unwilling victim. And the fire goes very far. You see the flames behind him while he's reading this letter from Willoughby. And it's another great scene where it's his own blindness. You know, Dixon is he's entranced by this letter. And then suddenly he realizes it. And she throws her final firebomb, and the flames burst into the station. And there's something burning on the desk. You know what it is? That's the file of the murder. And he sticks it under his pants and he says, okay, it's like, think like a detective. There's something there. And he bursts through the flames and rolls out onto the street. And James, the small person, little person, smothers his flames with his jacket. And we cut to dawn, and James and Mildred are sitting on the curb. It's daylight, there are fire trucks around. And the black inspector comes to interview them. And it's another funny moment. He says, wait a second, you just said that you two came around the corner? And he said, yeah. And the inspector says, are you two boyfriend and girlfriend? And what does James say? He said, well, it's early in the relationship. I mean, it's so appropriate, and it's true. So it's not a joke on him. It's like he's trying to hide it and be truthful at the same time. So he becomes a great character. You know, it's like that endears him to us because he's covering for her, because we pity her, even though she's a mean son of a gun. And he's just been a victim all his life. He's damaged too, right? He's a dwarf. He's been shat upon his whole life, and, you know, kind of has a thing for Mildred because she's the only single woman of his age available in town. Let me see. So at the end of that scene, he asks her for a date. She says, okay, I'll go out with you. Right. Then we go to the hospital, and Red is there in the hospital recovering from his wounds that Dixon gave him. And then Dixon, we know it's Dixon. I think we all know it's Dixon, who comes in with bandages around his face. And Red doesn't know it's Dixon yet, and offers him orange juice, you know, comes over for the company. And then Dixon starts crying, and he realizes who it is. And he said, oh no. And he has to go away and sit down in the chair. So this is Red's come to Jesus moment. You know, you beat me up, you put me in the hospital. Brad, did you have something to say, or just?
Yeah, you know, there are at least three wonderful acts of gratuitous kindness in this movie. That giving the glass of orange juice, that's one. When the midget steps up, that's two. And when the sergeant, I've forgotten his name. Cedric, he allows Dixon to come in the evening to save face. And these are actions that we don't necessarily expect to come from some of these people, given the situations that they're in, and yet they're able to tap into something that allows them to act kindly at moments when we would least expect it.
Okay. Do you want to change your description of the acts as gratuitous? I think you meant something else.
Well, no, I'm not. What do you think that I should be changing it to?
Magnanimous,
They're
genuine,
yeah,
self-sacrificing.
Yeah, how I'm not sure what the right word is, but they're without an expectation of something in return.
Right. There's no rancor in it.
Well, not so much rancor. They're being. I'm not expecting something back when I do this good deed. They're just doing it out of
who they are,
a sense of kindness.
You could call it a moments of grace, capital G.
Okay.
Undeserved generosity, that's what grace is, of course it comes from a divinity in the biblical sense, but it's like when you don't deserve it, but you get something good because somebody treated you kindly. And they know what you did that may not have been so good. But I'm glad you brought that up. But you see, after Red goes and sits down in the chair, he's already offered orange juice to the stranger. He's thinking, how do I feel about this man who just beat me up and almost killed me? And then he comes to his moment of giving grace, walks forward. He says, "Oh, stop crying. It's going to just ruin your wounds, the salt. And here's your orange juice." And he turns the straw towards him. And it's
So maybe this is what Jeffrey is saying, that it's a Christian version of forgiveness and so on. I mean, it's forgiving somebody, though they don't deserve it, is not necessarily a particularly Jewish concept. It is a particularly Christian concept.
Yeah.
But I'm moving over to potentially Jeffrey's version of some of where this comes from.
Well, I think they are rising to their better selves when they do this.
Maybe one's better self is to be angry at somebody for something like that forever.
Yeah. Well, Cedric feels sorry for Dixon, and he knows he's kind of like violating station house ethics, but he says, use your key, come in anyway, but leave it on your desk, right? And the orange juice is something that's all Red has in the moment. I mean, the point is, these are not major scenes, but they're human indications of how this situation has affected each person in the moment.
But
it's minor characters.
But I think that they are major scenes in the sense that this movie begins, the very first scenes are we see that hillside, which has been stripped from mining. And then we see these billboards flapping in the air. This is a town which is dying.
Right.
And they can't rent these billboards because nobody's going down these roads anymore, because there's been a highway that's been built. So this is a town that's dying, and its infrastructure is dying. Its police is broken. Its church is broken. It's the intelligentsia of the town, the dentist, a professional, broken, and yet, despite the death and the death of this town and the death of the people in the town, there are sparks of life. And that's what we're seeing with these acts of kindness.
Okay, thank you. That was very eloquent, Brad, and elegant. You're right, absolutely right. And that's, blame it all on Martin McDonough because it's his authorship. All right, we're closing in on the end. I do want to cover some more. Let's talk about Dixon overhearing the two guys bragging in the bar about raping some woman, and he thinks he's got it. Now, just as Red redeems himself by offering, he says, I forgive you because I'm going to offer you the orange juice. Dixon says, oh my God, I could solve this case. I owe it to Willoughby. I owe it to Mildred, maybe. It's like, this will solve a lot of my problems if I can solve the case. I'll be a good cop. And we don't know what's going on at the time. He picks a fight with the other guy. And we've learned later when he goes home, stumbles home, he's scraping the DNA samples of the other man's skin from under his fingernails, which is why he scratches him in the face. And he calls Mildred and says, I think I may have cracked the case open. We'll see. They're looking into it now. Don't lose hope, but don't be disappointed if it doesn't work out. And it doesn't work out. The guy was serving in Iraq. Another funny scene is when the new inspector says, well, I can't tell you where he was, but he was somewhere else out of the country and had a military commander, and there was sand there. Where do you think that was? And Dixon doesn't know. It's Afghanistan, or I don't know when the film was set. Could be Iraq, like it's. He would do that. That was a true scene, given what we know of both characters in the scene. And then he goes home and he puts a shotgun to his face. Is anybody worried about his state of mind there? Yeah. And he stays embracing the shotgun. And then he calls Mildred and says it wasn't him. And there's silence and he hears her crying over the line. And it's lovely. And he says, but I know where he is. He's in Idaho. And she says, oh, I just happen to be going to Idaho in the morning. Do you want to join me? So this totally diverts the movie, in a new direction. Oh, are they going to get this guy who didn't commit the rape, but he surely committed another rape? And sure enough, the next morning, he comes to her house. He throws his shotgun in the back of her station wagon. And the lovely shot, the shotgun is framed on a blanket in the back of the wagon between the two of them looking at it. And it's like they're saying, what are we about to do? You don't see their faces, but that's what that shot expresses. And then they get in the car. And the song that's singing is very telling. And I don't know the song well. I think it's something like Buckeye Stallions Rodeo or something. And it's some people cry forever. What does their laughter mean? It's repeated several times in that scene. It's very poetical. But she says, do you really feel like killing him, this guy? And he says, no, I'm not so sure. I don't think I do. And she says, I don't either. Well, we've got a long trip ahead of us to decide. That's the end of the movie. Now, does anybody want to interpolate or extrapolate or deconstruct what that means to us? Is this really a movie about vengeance, or is it a movie about forgiveness? You guys make me
Neither.
Well,
neither. Okay, I love that. Who's Vern? Neither.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
neither. It's a movie about it happens.
Complexity.
It's complex. And
Okay.
she isn't going to forgive him, but she isn't going to get justice. It just because it happened and it's terrible.
I don't disagree with that, but I have another way of expressing it. So let's let other people share, and then I'll tell them they're all wrong. See? Steve.
Well, I think it's about redemption primarily. That seems to, I mean, there's too many characters. I mean, the end is almost like a feel-good thing. The first 2 hours are brutally violent, and then in the last couple minutes, it's sort of a feel-good kind of thing. People coming around saying, "Well, maybe this just isn't the right way. Maybe we can do better." That's my sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brad?
Well, I think there's a theater of the absurd element to this movie. The ending reminds me of the end of Waiting for Godot, where they say they're going to leave and then they're immobile. And you think about the basic concept behind this whole film is a town that's all upset about billboards, but these billboards are on a street that nobody is driving down anymore. So there's an absurdity to, inherent in this film, and it ends to me on a very absurd note.
Yeah, much ado about nothing, and they're casually considering murder instead of with anger in their hearts. Okay, this is the third time I've seen it, only the second time in the last 2 weeks. You could call this a thriller or a procedural or a whodunit, and there's no closure, is there? So it's not a closure on the crime. I think it's a closure on where Dixon and Mildred are stuck and where the others may be as well. It's like she can finally let go of her thirst for vengeance, for revenge, and she's perhaps realizing she doesn't have a taste for it anymore. She can't carry that burden for the rest of her life. It won't bring her daughter back. And he's saying, I can't bring the sheriff back, and I'd feel bad if I killed another rapist, but without going through the judicial system. I'm a real cop, So I think the closure, the arc is that both Mildred and Dixon have come to a realization about themselves and an acceptance of we have to follow justice. Justice shall ye pursue. We have to follow justice wherever it takes us. And if it takes them to more violence, they can't do it. Right? That's not justice to them. And again, there's something essentially good about both these people. And that's why they back off from we're going to kill them. They need the ride to settle down. It's the long de-escalation from 12 months of pain and frustration, and for each of them a little longer, Yeah, Linda.
I think it's also showing that they had to grow spiritually because they had a worldview and something happened that contrasted that worldview. There was a gap. There was a painful gap between that worldview that things should be okay, people should be safe. And then something happened where it was a juxtaposition, didn't work. They had to work with that and process that and come up with a new adaptation.
Yeah.
And in the process, grow spiritually to expand what was possible in being able to move forward in their life.
Right, exactly right. So that's why I think there is closure at the end. It's their story. It's not the story of the murder. Anybody else? Okay, this was a great discussion.
Yes, I think Jerry wanted to say something.
Yes, Jerry.
Yeah, I think it's both vengeance and forgiveness. And the lesson or the moral, if you will, is that vengeance doesn't work, but forgiveness and love does work. And it's, to me, it's very ironic because just the other day, the Republicans got rid of McCarthy out of vengeance.
Yeah. Well, it's not the first time they've done something vengeful.
I want to say something.
May not be the last.
Yeah. Oh, really, Steve?
I just hope the Dems gambled correctly. That's what I hope.
Well, I don't think Jim Jordan is a reasonable alternative. He's just as loony. But
yeah, that's the problem, isn't it?
Well, there's bad choices among the whole party. Who could have allowed Trump to survive?
He's a
this?
worse choice. He'd be a worse choice.
I think there was somebody else wanted to say something. but
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Roz.
Roz.
I love the part when Dixon said that he knew she started the fire.
Everybody in town.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's like he became a great detective. Who else would have done this? Who else has such animosity to the police? She's the only one.
I know, and here he is all scarred and burned
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
miserable and in pain, and he's riding with her, knowing that she's the cause of his. of
Yeah,
the-
but he also knows she thought he wasn't there, I think, or we know she didn't think anyone was at the station.
That wouldn't be good enough for me.
Okay. But we knew she wasn't,
We knew.
but he didn't. So why was he so chummy? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Maybe he just had a change of heart, realizing. I can't explain that. If you don't.
I think he had nowhere else to go, and so.
Well, okay, that's a reason too.
Yes.
A reason for him to have a change of heart. He realizes he's alone in this. She's the only one who can share what he went through. So for that, they both reached a point where they don't have the energy to push back against the unknown. This, the world is empty notion. It's too much to bear, and you
It's
can't.
also a way of elevating his own life.
Yes, absolutely. No, they're both better off for that quasi resolution at the end. They can both carry on now. And it's just, this is, Jeff Melvoin teaches at SC as well. And he came up to me the other day and he said, I teach writing in the business management school of film. And I show all these old movies that have great writing, because Jeff teaches television, and all these examples of great plotting and great writing and dialogue. And the students don't seem to warm to it because they're old movies. And these are, 25, 35-year-old grad students. And he said, do you have any films that could be used as an example of great writing? And I'm watching this and I said, my God, this is one of them. If you look at the length of the scenes and how they proceed from one to the other, they're all connected. It's like dominoes falling one after the other, meant to be. It's really a lovely film. And yet it keeps all these balls in the air, so many characters, and each in their own way come to some kind of closure on their challenges. And there are others, but not quite as many that are this good. So we're going to meet, when was it? I think today's the 5th. We're going to meet on the 26th.
Yeah, October 26th.
Yeah. And I haven't decided yet, but are you up for a happy film or another tense film? People don't mind. Doesn't matter. Bring it on. You guys are hardy.
A good friend.
There is a lovely film that we're going to discuss. It's not available to stream yet. Well, it is, but you have to pay $13 to see it. And there's so many others. We'll wait till it's $5. I just don't want that to be an impediment for anybody. Just like somebody, the woman in the beginning, she watched You're Hurting My Feelings. That was $20. It started out at $20 and now it's $13, and she took the leap, but she liked the movie, so I don't feel bad. We'll get to that as a lighter movie. It's who is it? Louise Dreyfus, and from Seinfeld, who's grown up, and Gandolfini.
Oh.
And no, that's enough said. Sorry, but Louise Dreyfus is in this next one. It's called You're Hurting My Feelings, and she's a playwright, and her husband's a therapist, and he's been telling her for 2 years that the play she's writing is great. And then she overhears him telling his best friend, the play's just god awful. I don't know how to tell her, and I don't want to hurt her feelings. And it sets into a lovely cascade of bad things happening because people hurt each other's feelings by trying to protect them how they really feel. There's some nice closure at the end. Compared to this film, it's lightweight, but it's fun. So maybe we'll see that when we need some levity. It's nice to track how people hurt each other because, thinking they're saving them from pain. So I think next in 2 weeks, we'll see a film called The Guilty. Not a lightweight film. Antoine Fuqua, the director of action movies, now remade it with Jake Gyllenhaal as a police officer who is sentenced to desk duty to a suicide, not an emergency hotline, because he did something wrong in the field of duty, and he and his partner are trying to cover it up. And the hearing's the next day. We're going to see the original it was based on. It's a Danish film by Gustav Möller, and it is about a police officer. And the storytelling is interesting, is that his story, his backstory is parceled out very slowly through the film. And in his answering the calls on the police line in one night, he's drawn into a story of a woman who's abducted by her husband, her estranged husband, and their 2 children left alone in the house. And I don't want to unravel the story for you, but the police officer is thrown into this. You never see anybody but the hotline people. You never see the voices on the other side of the phone. So you are experiencing the whole movie, seeing his face only, hearing those voices, and seeing him react. It's a brilliant performance. And in many ways, it's like Frances McDormand, who doesn't do much with her face, but you know exactly what she's feeling. And there's so many different feelings. It is a terrific movie. And it's a terrific movie for performance. I forget the name of the actor, but that's available on Prime. But there are 2 movies called The Guilty. This is not Antoine Fuqua. This is Gustav Möller. There are subtitles. It is terrific. And it is you'll be on the edge of your seat, but it's a powerful movie. So I don't want to say anything more. If you don't like it, you can shoot me, figuratively. So please come back. The newbies, David Bornstein, Emma Gold, Lynn Machikow, and there was one other new person, Strum. I hope he comes back. And the woman from the Hub. You can go look at Hub. It's not, you can go for hub.com, and it's Jewish events, Jewish discussion events all over. There's a lot of religious events, like a minyan here, a minyan there, here, there, everywhere, a minyan. You know how the song goes. Thank you too. My God, where were you for my stand-up routine last weekend?
Jim.
Yeah.
The one scene that you didn't talk about, which was hysterical, was the one in the restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
In the restaurant?
Yeah.
Oh, where she confronts her ex-husband?
Well, where the little person takes
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And I mean, the 2 of them were so out of place at this restaurant.
Yeah.
And then who comes in but the ex-husband and the 19-year-old. And
Okay. That's also an example of another character who, God damn it, he's so much himself. He's not a pushover. It's okay. You never took me seriously anyway. Fuck you. It's like people reaching their core with us, the audience. It was a great moment.
brilliant scene.
Yes, thank you. Well, Peter Dinklage is a great actor, and he's in a movie about a train station. I can't remember what it is. You should look up his credits and see the movie. Everything he does is good. Oh, he was also in Elf. Remember Elf with Peter from The Godfather? No, what's his name? Tall, lanky guy with curly red hair, curly blonde hair.
James Caan?
James Caan, right? Sorry, James Caan, and he Will Ferrell plays his elf son, who was long lost to him, and Peter Dinklage is the tyrannical book author who comes in and jumps on the table and reads the riot act to the publishing team. You know, it's a great performance where he runs with it and chews that scenery in a delicious way. So see Elf with your grandchildren. I mean, they'll love it, even if they're not Christian. I suspect many of them are not, because it's all about finding your family wherever you find it, you know? So, okay, thank you so much. This was a very enjoyable evening for me. I hope you two all enjoyed it. And I'll see you in 2 weeks.
3
Take
weeks.
care.
You said 3 weeks. You said October
It's the-
26th.
Well, no, it's the 26th. Oh, right, so it's 3 weeks, yeah. Next week is too soon. I'm teaching the next Thursday, and I have the next Thursday off. So it's 3 weeks, but we'll get 2 in this month. Okay, take care, everybody.
Oh, Jim, I have a
Yeah,
quick question for you. By virtue of my coming on this evening, am I gonna be on the email list?
I need your email, David. Did I get it?
I did register.
You did register? They will.
Yeah.
Why don't you give it to me now so I can put you on
Sure.
my list? Because
Okay.
they have a mailing list of like 2,000 names and they can't parcel out a single blast to just us. So I have to do it all myself. Thank you very much.
Okay.
You know, but what is your email, David?
Okay, it's D as in David, B as in boy, O-R, N as in Nancy, 58 at
5-8,
Yahoo.
did you say?
Yeah, 5 and 8.
5
So
and 8.
D, yeah, dborn 58
8.
at yahoo.com.
Okay, you date yourself, but that's okay. I won't tell anybody.
No, actually, that's not my birthday.
Oh, okay. A lot of
I
people.
was born in 1950. I established this email account when I was 58. And so I just.
I
grabbed it.
see. Okay, something to celebrate.
Yes.
Okay, so you're not quite an early adopter, but I'm glad you did. Hopefully we'll see you in 3 weeks.
Yes.
Arlene, always
Thank
good to have you. And Steve Greenberg didn't say anything tonight, but it's okay. I love that you attend. And see you in 3 weeks. Bye all.